This is a moment in Jewish history. I am your host, Ben Bresky, and recently I visited Beersheba, where I saw the archaeological site of Tel Beersheba. There in the desert are the ruins of walls which were once a city dating back to the Iron Age, the period in which the Israelites lived, and even earlier. One of the first things you see when you walk into the site is a well. The name Beersheba means 7 wells and is taken from the Bible. Was this one of the 7 wells that Abraham swore by? Well, according to the plaque, some indeed connected to the well mentioned in the book of Genesis. There it is quoted. And it came to pass that Isaac's servants came and told him about the well which they had dug, and said to him, "We have found water." So he called it Sheba. Therefore, the name of the city is Beersheba to this day. Archaeological finds from the earlier Chalcolithic period, or Copper Age, have been discovered. The remains of the buildings date back to the Iron Age, possibly during the reign of King Hezekiah of Judea. I walked through the walls, which were once a governor's palace, storehouses, an elaborately constructed central water system, and residential homes. Many of them are 4-room houses, also known as Israelite houses. This was the standard style house of the Jewish people who lived in the land of Israel during that period, and remains of 4-room houses have been found in Hebron, Jerusalem, Megiddo, and other places. The site has a lookout tower in which visitors to Tel Beersheba can climb up and have a panoramic view. In the distance is the modern city of Beersheba, today the 5th largest in Israel, with a hospital, university, music theater, and more. It wasn't that hard to take a bus from the Beersheba Central Bus Station and get off at the stop for Tel Beersheba, but upon disembarking, there was a definite sense that I was in the middle of nowhere. But 3,200 years ago, this was an important town. Another striking artifact at Tel Beersheba is the horned altar. Now, a number of years ago, I participated in a project called Voice of the Bible, in which I actually read the entire Old Testament, which was then turned into an audiobook. If you want a copy, send me an email. So I definitely remember reading about the horned altar and wondered what it was and looked like. And now here I was in ancient Beersheba looking at an actual horned altar. It's about the height of a kitchen counter and has 4 things on each corner that I can only describe as, well, horns. The plaque has a drawing of priests conducting an offering on it with smoke rising up, and there is a quote from 2 Kings. He removed the high places and broke the sacred pillars. I often wondered what the biblical text meant by the high places. King Hezekiah was one of the good ones who did that which was just in the eyes of the Lord. He tore down all the idolatrous altars and idols in the land. So how was it that I was now looking at one? What would King Hezekiah say? Well, the story is this. The altar was not actually found standing. It was found in pieces, and the stones were reused as part of the wall of a storehouse. Archaeologists reassembled the stones, and today it sits in the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. The one in Tel Beersheba is a replica, placed there for curious tourists like me. So I guess King Hezekiah succeeded after all. Maybe he would be proud that one day in the future, the altar is merely a museum piece that no one actually uses for cultic worship, while synagogues and yeshivot flourish in an independent Jewish state. But not everyone believes that this was one of the altars from the time of King Hezekiah. In the mid-1970s, Professor Yohanan Aharoni was the head of the excavation at the site. He dated the altar to the period of Hezekiah, and the fact that it was found repurposed lends credence to the idea that it was torn down. But his great rival, Professor Yigael Yadin, dates it to 100 years later. Aharoni was born in Germany, and when the Nazis rose to power, he and his family escaped to the land of Israel. He established the Tel Aviv University Institute of Archaeology and participated in numerous excavations. Yigael Yadin was born in Jerusalem and became Israel's second army chief of staff. rising in the ranks of the fledgling Israel Defense Forces to become a celebrated war hero. Upon retiring from military service, he devoted his time to archaeology and was awarded for his work on the Dead Sea Scrolls and published several books. Here's what Professor Yohanan Aharoni wrote in Biblical Archaeologist in 1974. Discovering the altar in Beersheba was a highlight of the excavation, but no great surprise. The 4 altar horns were found arranged one beside the other in a wall, 3 intact and the 4th with its top knocked off. All stones are well-smoothed ashlar masonry, which seems to stand in contradiction to the biblical law that the altar should be built of unhewn stones upon which no man has lifted iron tools. This ancient tradition evidently was disregarded in Beersheba. Alternatively, we could suppose that the law was taken literally and the dressing was done with tools of bronze or stone instead of common iron. One stone has a deeply engraved decoration of a twisting snake. The demolition of the altar is of much interest. The storehouse in which the altar stones had been reused was destroyed at the end of the 8th century BCE, possibly during Sennacherib's campaigns in 701. It appears that the repair of the building and the dismantling of the altar took place during the reign of Hezekiah. This is a most dramatic corroboration of the religious reform carried out by him, as expressed in the harsh accusations of Rabbi Shaked in 2 Kings. But if you say to me, we rely on the Lord our God, is it not he whose high places and altars Hezekiah has removed, saying to Judah and Jerusalem, you shall worship before the altar in Jerusalem? Professor Aharoni's rival, Yigael Yadin of Hebrew University in Jerusalem, wrote a follow-up in the Bulletin of the American Schools of Oriental Research in 1976, entitled Beersheba, the high place destroyed by King Josiah. Professor Yadin writes, one of the most drastic acts of King Josiah in the implementation of his reform was the systematic destruction of the high places, Bamot, including that in Beersheba. It is therefore very surprising that the excavator of Beersheba, Y. Aharoni, has come to the conclusion that the city proper was destroyed a century before Josiah in the days of Hezekiah. Yadin continues to discuss the dates of the pottery found there and the armies of Sennacherib who invaded. While I can't weigh in on who's right in the debate, what I can say is that here are 2 Jewish men who lived through the Holocaust, fought in Israel's War of Independence, and then went on to connect to their people's roots by literally digging in the ground. Speaking of armies, I was surprised to read about the soldiers of Australia and New Zealand on a plaque in Beersheba. During World War I, the Battle of Beersheba was a decisive victory for the British and their allies, the Australian Light Horse and New Zealand Mounted Rifles Brigade. But that is a story for another time. If you want to hear about it, send me an email and check out my past shows at benbresky.substack.com. Thank you to all the listeners and sponsors, and Shalom.